All right, hello everyone. I am Thomas. Welcome to my channel. I do educational material here on this channel, and today is the 92nd video on the reciprocal system of theory, and I think the 70th video on this his final book that's called Beyond Space and Time. And we are in chapter 23, called Religion Reexamined. Now, Beyond Space and Time came out in 1995. Larson died in 1990, and a lot of his followers were embarrassed by this book because they didn't think that he would, as a hard-headed scientist, would put out something on metaphysics, on religion, philosophy, and psychology, where all of his earlier work was on physics and chemistry and astronomy. And I'm not sure where to come down on that, but it does look like it's, was pretty completed work. And why I'm looking at it is because I think it's probably, his most accessible thing, at least topically, and you can get into the system and into his thinking. We will be going into the harder scientific stuff a little bit later. The gist of Larson's theory is it's a theory of everything, and so you can apply it to any subject. Once you kind of become fluent with the reciprocal system, you can apply it to whatever it is that you have a penchant for, and it allows you to kind of be free of the scientists and the white lab coats, because you can now do it for yourself. You don't have to trust them. You can take the reciprocal system, and it might take a little while, but you can figure out how to apply it to these other subjects, any subject. Now, the gist of the theory is that the universe, unlike the Greeks thought the universe was made out of matter, atoms. And Einstein thought that the universe looked like it was made out of atoms, but it was really made out of energy, by E equals mc squared. And Larson came along a little bit later and he said, well, the mere fact that there's E equals mc squared and that energy can be converted to matter and vice versa means that neither one of those things can possibly be the fundamental thing of the universe. And Larson more looked to the c squared part, the speed of light squared. He said that the universe is made out of motion. And motion is the relationship between space and time. And he wasn't looking at any kind of vectorial motion. Larson was looking at a scalar motion. It's a motion without any direction, or with all directions. You can envision this as taking a balloon, putting a bunch of dots on the balloon and blowing up the balloon, with a magic marker, and then blowing up the balloon. All of the dots are moving away from each other, but not any particular direction. That's really a scalar motion. And it takes 3 dimensions of vectorial space to really represent 1 dimension of a scalar motion. And so now to get to the motion is the relationship between time and space. And that really means that space and time are reciprocals of each other, in the same way that you have a fraction 3/4, and its reciprocal is 4/3. They are, to get from one to the other, you just invert. And so space and time are reciprocals of each other, and they have the same qualities as each other. What we know about space, it's 3-dimensional or more. Therefore, time is also three-dimensional or more. And then time is always progressing. It's always getting later and later and later. So too, space is progressing. Things are always getting farther and farther apart. And again, you can look at the balloon for that kind of analogy. Or, and if you suck in the balloon, then you get an inward scalar motion. So scalar motion has a direction. It's either in or out. And the Hubble telescope also observed the recession of the distant galaxies, kind of like that balloon analogy. All of the galaxies are moving away from each other. That is the progression of space, or the flow of space. So you have what, Larson, you have coordinate time, and then you also have coordinate space, and you also have coordinate time. You have the progression of time, and you also have the progression of space. Larson calls that clock time and clock space. And then space and time are also quantized, meaning that there is a minimum unit of time and a minimum unit of space. 1 unit of space and 1 unit of time is the speed of light. The speed of light, the c squared part again, or at least the c of the c squared part, is the neutral point of the universe. Unlike Einstein, who said that the speed of light is the maximum speed of the universe, Larson is saying it's the boundary between two different kind of co-universes, what he calls the material sector, which is the slower than the speed of light sector that we're familiar with, the world of atoms and matter, and physics and chemistry. But then there's also the cosmic universe, which he calls sector 2. This is the universe that's moving faster than the speed of light. And this has to do with, well, I think all kinds of mental phenomena. And the material universe builds up by aggregation, atoms and molecules bonding with each other and such like, till it gets to its most complex level, which is DNA. A few billion atoms per molecule. And at that level, the sector 1 component, DNA, becomes eligible to be controlled by a sector 2 entity. And when that happens, in the same way that a thermostat would take control of a room, the thermostat being just a small part of that room, but it controls the environment. Sector 2 is just a small part of a sector, of a combination of sector 1 and 2, but it controls sector 2. And the overall linkage between sector 1 and sector 2 is called the life unit by Larson. So life is the combination of a DNA molecule, its most advanced form of sector 1, being controlled by a sector 2 entity. And so this entity is being motivated, so to speak, by survival. And this entity starts at a single-celled organism, and it grows and it develops and evolves up to its most complex level, which Larson calls the intelligent human being. And at that point, the intelligent human being becomes eligible to be controlled overall by what Larson calls a metaphysical unit, or beyond space and time, or independent of space and time. Larson calls it sector 3. Other people might call it God, or the gods, or the spiritual, or the religious, the numinous, or whatever. But that entity, according to Larson, is guided by ethical behavior or good behavior. And so a human being finds themselves in the middle between a sector 2 control and sector 3 control. Sometimes those things are work together, but other times they are at cross purposes, and the human being has to decide through his free will which to choose, the Sector 3 entity of ethical behavior or the Sector 2 entity of survival behavior or animal behavior. And Sector 3 communicates with the human being through various means such as intuition, scientific insight, religious revelation. And that's where we are. So that's what this final book called Beyond Space and Time is about. It's about Sector 3 phenomena. And so we're here in chapter 23 looking at religion re-examined. And we're toward the very beginning of this chapter. And he's talking about a rapprochement between science and religion. He says the principal obstacle to a rapprochement between science and religion is thus completely demolished, basically by the reciprocal system, by the findings of this new work. The obstacle to that is demolished. So we can have a merging of science and religion under the reciprocal system. So we're going to start with Larson right here. All justification for the scientist's reluctance to concede the reality of religious revelation has similarly been swept away. The new findings of this book make it clear not only that such revelations have been and are being received, but that revelation is merely one manifestation of a process of obtaining information from metaphysical sources that is widespread in human life and is in general use in the scientific fields. Then, too, we have established that the principles of morality do come to us from the metaphysical region through revelation, intuition, or insight, just as the religious organizations have always claimed. Aside from some assertions as to the nature of the metaphysical existence, which are outside the scope of this present investigation, the foregoing are the basic religious doctrines. To emphasize this point, let us consider the following list of basic beliefs that the revealed religions have in common, condensed from one compiled by William E. Hocking. 1, there's 6 on this list. 1, there is an existence outside the space-time universe, or independent of the space-time universe. 2, there is contact between this existence and man. 3, the external region is the home of divine agencies. 4, the agencies are superior to us and should be obeyed and worshipped. 5, there are ways of living that have the approval of the divine agencies. 6, the souls of men, or some of them, enter the external region after death. Okay, that's Hocking. Now back to Larson. On consideration of this list, it is evident that the adjective divine in items 3 and 5 should be replaced by some such word as non-physical, inasmuch as the intention of item 3 is only to assert that the agencies exist, and that of item 5 is to assert that there are ways of living approved by these agencies. The significance of these two statements is independent of the nature of the agencies, which is covered separately in item 4. The sweeping character of the victory which the scientific findings of this work give to religion in general over humanism, materialism, naturalism, and other non-religious or anti-religious beliefs grounded on opinions as to the implications of the previous existing body of scientific knowledge is demonstrated by the fact that if the foregoing change in wording were made and some of the other language is given a reasonably broad interpretation, 4 of the 6 statements have been definitely verified in the preceding pages. Evidence confirming one more, number 6, will be presented later, and nothing adverse to the remaining unconfirmed statement, number 4, has been found. Okay, just going back here, number 4 is these agencies are superior to us and should be obeyed and worshipped. And number 6 is the souls of men, or some of them, enter the external region after death. Okay, so those are the two Number 6 will be confirmed here later, and number 4 is unconfirmed. The others have been confirmed, according to Larson. Back to him. With the benefit of the factual knowledge of metaphysical existence and phenomena that has been developed in this work, and the confirmation of the basic religious assertions, it is now possible for the scientist to accept religion in general on the same basis that he accepts scientific theories, that is, on the strength of reason applied to factual premises. He is no longer called upon to exercise a faith, a concept that to him has heretofore been essentially unintelligible and of very doubtful validity, in order to find something that will invest human existence with the sense of purpose that is lacking in purely mechanistic science. Even faith itself can now be seen to have a rational basis, notwithstanding the fact that in application it is so vague and uncertain that the validity of any specific article of faith is open to question. Both religion and science have had a valid perception of certain metaphysical truths, but inasmuch as their knowledge of these truths has been received through intuitive processes, there has hitherto been no way in which their validity could be substantiated. Acceptance has had to be based either on each individual's own intuitive perception of that validity, or on his conviction, intuitive or otherwise, that a revelation claimed to have been received by someone else was genuine. Such a conviction is called faith. Our findings indicate that, in absence of the kind of rational basis for religious beliefs that is being supplied by this work, the religious appeal to faith has been, to a considerable extent, justified. Religious revelations have been received, and in view of the extreme importance of these revealed truths, the recipients and their associates have considered themselves under an obligation to disseminate this knowledge as widely as possible. In the absence of any physical or intellectual way of demonstrating the validity of the revelations, there has been no option but to call upon individuals to accept them without proof. On first consideration, it may seem that this is totally unwarranted, but it should be realized that the persons to whom this exhortation is addressed are already intuitively prepared to accept it, in part, if not in its entirety. For instance, most people, including most scientists, have accepted the religious assertion that the universe exists for a purpose, and have rejected the scientific assertion that no such purpose exists, because they have intuitive knowledge that there is a purpose. Similarly, the religious assertion that there is an aspect of human life which transcends the limitations of physical existence falls upon ground already prepared for it by an intuitive realization that human life is, in some respects, basically different from all other kinds of biological life. It should be understood, however, that the qualified justification which the present investigation finds for religious faith applies only to those items that the individual accepts of his own accord. That is, where he has an intuitive perception that the article of faith is valid. If he has any doubt, then acceptance on the basis of faith is simply reliance on the pronouncement of authority which has no scientific standing. The religious exhortations to have faith, therefore, have no genuine effect, unless the faith already exists, that is, the intuition is present. It cannot be generated by persuasion. Missionary effort or proselytizing may succeed in modifying the form of the intuitive belief. It may substitute one God for another, or alter opinions as to how he should be worshipped, but the substance of such a belief is seldom changed. our finding that religious faith has more justification than science has hitherto been willing to concede does not imply that the beliefs to which that faith applies are necessarily valid. Religious intuition is subject to the same limitations as any other intuitive process. Its product is a probability, not a certainty. And the degree of probability is highly dependent on the kind of information that is involved. As emphasized earlier, present-day interpretations of religious revelations with respect to physical matters are generally wrong, either because the original recipients were not adequately prepared to receive the information correctly, or because the meaning of the original language is misunderstood. The new findings give no support to interpretations of religious literature or tradition that reach conclusions of this nature, conclusions that are in conflict with established scientific knowledge. The credibility of Archbishop Ussher's assertion that the world was created in 4004 BC is not in the least enhanced by the fact that his calculations were based on data from biblical sources. Okay, I believe that is as far as we're going to get for today. So he's getting into some interesting stuff here. The point that he's emphasizing here at the end is just that we get religious revelations, intuition, scientific insights. Those are always correct. They're coming from Sector 3. They're always correct. Our ability to translate them is limited and needs to be improved. We need to practice. So we often get them wrong, but we could get them right. Okay, we'll see you next time. Have a great day.